Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk about how to weather a, a flat car and then putting on a deck or various things on it. And first, I'm going to talk about various options and tell you why I sort of decided to go the way that I have chosen. So this is like an ON30 car from Bachmann. It's a flat car. They used to make a lot of these. They don't make them anymore, although I hope they eventually get started again. It has a lot of really cool details. You can see it has wood grains that are along the planks. Very nice details in the pockets. It has this the brake wheel, which has the shaft, and it has the gears down here, which are nice to weather as well. So we start with this, and you can do a lot of these, a lot of things with these, put a lot of various loads and tarps and all sorts of other things. The challenge is, of course, that it doesn't quite have that realistic look, and it sort of has a more of a toyish kind of look, although quite nice as it is, and much better than things used to be. So the first option that I ever tried was actually these planks that you would buy this whole thing, and I think it was a laser process of some sort that just put these etching lines in it, and if you look really closely, it also has all of these bolt or details on it. It's quite nice. It peels, the bottom peels off, and you just stick the whole thing on. You do have to make a little notch here for the brake wheel and the gears, which make it look even with the surface. There's two issues, well, three, that I'll talk about with these, although again, quite a nice evolution compared to the past. The first one is that the wood grain is not quite along the planks, right? Because this is made out of a thin, flat sheet of some material. And when I put solutions on here to age these things, you end up seeing striations that are more along the wood grain of the material that was made out of. The second issue is, and I'll bring this up a little bit later, is that although it's really thin, it does add a little bit of thickness to the deck. And if you're just using it as is and don't need to worry about the thickness, then this is a fine option. The third issue is that the sticky material that's on these planks eventually will peel up, and they will curl up on the edges, sometimes around this wheel. And so I've had to add a little dab of super glue in order to tack them back down and just clamp them with a clothespin or something until that dries. So let me show you the challenge that I mean about the deck, the thickness. So here's a tank car from Bachmann again, ON30, and you can see these straps, these metal straps, have screws in them that are right there. Once you add the deck on here, because I want to weather this, right? I don't like it like this. Once you add that wooden deck, this is too tight. You cannot get that little screw back into that hole. So you have to make a hole a little bit higher up and then put in that screw into it. And then, of course, the ladder, which goes into the deck, you have to create some holes into that. So it's all doable. I gained that from experience. It works and it looks just fine. It's just I would rather not have to do all of that gymnastics as well for this tank car. All right, the next evolution, if you permit me for a second, is really the 18-foot flat cars that Bachmann did for ON30, and they tried to do their own version of aging, which again looks pretty nice. It's starting to really get there. They really are doing much better. The challenge is, of course, is that it's not quite realistic because you get this nice white band right here that although is just fine, and with a load on here, you probably don't notice it very much, but it does have a little bit of oddness to it. For me, these are a little dark as well, so I also age these. I can just take these as is and age them. So let me show you what it looks like, and you'll see what the rest of the video shows you how I get to what it looks like. So I start off with, as we had, the Bachmann flat cart, and I do a variety of washes, and I'm very random about these washes, and eventually it looks like this, where I added nothing. I added there's no thickness added, and you can see I also aged the sides and aged the wheels, aged the steps, and everything else, and it's all done pretty easily and pretty quickly. It's just there's some drying time in between, and so I take 5 minutes in the morning, put on a first coat, and quickly get it all done. So it's pretty random. Here's a second one that I've done with the brake wheel. Again, it looks very different, and each one looks basically completely different because I would not be able to make it look the same anyway, even if I wanted to. Now, these are a little bit lighter than what I liked, and this was early efforts. Nowadays I make them a little browner and a little bit darker, but in the end it doesn't matter necessarily a whole lot, especially if you put on various loads. So here's an example of a car that has the weather decking on it, and then various loads on it where I've got a tank, a square tank, and a pressure piece of equipment here. Of course, you got to have someone playing guitar that's sitting there, and I always like putting animals on my cars. I think this is a Rottweiler. It's a very nice piece of added on detail for this car. Okay, so the next part about the rest of this videos are about the washes. Here is what's really, really important about the kinds of skill set that you need. You need to be very, very bad about coloring in the lines. The worse you are about making sure that everything is right, the better you're going to be at making it look random. And my brain likes details. It likes making sure that things are perfect. And it turns out that that is the enemy of doing this well. So the worse you are at painting, the worse you are at making sure that everything is perfect, the better you're going to be at this. Okay, let's talk about the things you're going to need to do all of the washes. And I'm the kind of person that just prepares everything first, because there's nothing like being interrupted to go prepare something else for the thing that I'm doing that slows me down. So I try to get everything that I need and prepare it together before I get started. So of course the first thing is an old piece of newspaper that can, and thick enough, with enough stuff that can absorb a lot of the water that we'll be using in this process. Okay, first thing you're going to need is, of course, white acrylic paint. This is the one that I use. You shake it, there's liquid in it, and I'm only, I pop it open and you drop a few drops on, and you use a paintbrush. The first thing is a very wide paintbrush. You can see it's about the kind of size this is. It needs to absorb a lot of water because you're going to thin this out like crazy, right? It's very, very thin layers, and that tends to be what works better. The next thing is I like pudding cups. I like pudding a lot, so I collect these cups. You don't necessarily need to like pudding yourself, but if you know someone who does, this is gonna generally hold the water and or the washes. You know, so for my whitewash, the water will eventually look like this. It's quite white because I really water down the white paint. Okay, the next part is a little bit trickier, and I'm a little concerned about sharing this, but because it can be dangerous depending on what you use. So please be very careful. Do this outside, and then when you store it appropriately in a very cold environment. What I do is I take a wash of, it's a combination of isopropyl alcohol, and this is 70% isopropyl alcohol, that I then take shoe shine stuff that is liquid, right? And what I do is I just pop this off. I take scissors and I cut this, and I pour it into a large jar. Then I also pour this into it and I mix the whole thing, right? And I do a brown one of this as well as a black one. The really nice thing is, and you know, these things are about $4 a piece or so. The isopropyl alcohol is $1 or $2 a piece as well. Now, and then I just shake the whole thing. Now, it's very messy, so I do it outside. I do it very slowly, and I do it in a tray like this. It's just wooden tray that I got for a couple bucks at a secondhand store. And then what I have is I have these jars that I can close because I don't want the isopropyl alcohol to evaporate while I'm just storing these solutions. And I have a black one and I have a brown one. And you know, I just shake them up, and as I use them they get less and less, and then I just add the other two. The other thing that I have is those pudding cups. I have one that's for brown. I always pour out a little bit in here so that I'm not always dipping directly out of this, and I pour out, here's the black one. Now, the really nice thing is this patina, this stuff that accumulates in here, it actually transfers a little bit of this sort of dryish kind of stuff onto the car that I'm going to age, and it gives it a very nice thing. I also have a paintbrush that is cheap, and you want cheap. You just want to be able to take lots and lots of this and just dab it on with lots of liquid. The nice thing is the isopropyl alcohol both dilutes the staining from the shoe shine as well as evaporates quickly. So it leaves this sort of residue on top of the flat car or anything else that you age. I actually use these to age wood as well. And the way for wood that I use is I take a brown and I put it on. I wait maybe a minute or two. I don't let it get too dry. And then I use the black, put it on, wait a minute or two, and they'll intermix kind of nicely. And then I use the brown again quickly, and they intermix. And it's sort of these three kind of wettish layers that sort of get together and produce this thing. So that is what, and of course, you have to have the cars that you want to age as part of what you're going to have. And then the one last thing that I use, which is very useful, and I use it often. Unfortunately, you can only buy, or at least I can only buy these in sets of 3, and it's a Testors. And now it sometimes the different companies make them, and it's a rust. It's a pen that is rust, and effectively there's a tip in here that is kind of squarish. And this is what I'll use to actually make almost all of my rusting on the undercarriage. And it shakes, right? You shake it, and then what you do is you press here on the tip, and as you press, there's ink that flows into this pad, and then you can start using it on your flat car. So if you have all of that ready, you're actually ready to get going on aging these flat cars. Okay, I would have shown you how to done this, but when I did the video for this, I hit the wrong settings, and then it all dried, and then I did not realize that I had done it wrong and taken everything out. So I'll just sort of describe the process. This used to be, to look pristine white, like pristine brown, like this. And after I finish the wash, it all takes care of itself. I use a white or a gray of these acrylics. I like the acrylics. They dry very nicely. They take a lot of water. These particular ones, I actually use the gray, mix it up really well. I pop the top off, and you can see there's a little spigot here, and I just put 1 and 2. And then I use this very wide brush that we talked about before with lots and lots and lots of water. I mean, just a ton of water. I just dip the whole thing in there. And then I just start going back and forth, right? And pooling is great, right? Because pooling will do stuff like this, right? And will make it very, very uneven. And remember, you got to be really bad at this, right? And then I just go down the sides here. I even at times I put it a little bit on the wheel well, on the actual wheels itself. Just let it just pool and let it drip, and just lots and lots of water. When you're done, you just put it back on here, and you let it drip dry as much as you can. This was an effort by someone previous to me that I bought this flat car for very cheap, because they had tried doing an aging with a very, very dark color. So I'm just going to put a couple coats on this to eventually whiten it out significantly more than it is before I start with the other washes. And then, of course, there is the 18-foot cars that I had talked about before from Bachmann, where they had already done a lot of the aging. And they do a nice job, but it's a little too dark for me, and it's also a little too even. So again, a white wash or a gray wash, both on all the sides. I even put it on the coupler, right on the coupler as well, and just let it sit wherever it's going to sit. It's not always perfect, but that's what you want, right? It's just very uneven situations. Okay. That's about it. It takes care of doing this. I do multiple cars at a time because it's a little bit messy, and then it all dries and it's all ready. This is about 24 hours after I did the initial wash, and it's nice and dry. And then now it's actually ready for the next sets of washes, which are the shoe polish stuff. Okay, so the next part here is a little bit messy. We're going to take the washes that we formed before. Here's the brown wash with the shoe polish, and I just put it in one of those pudding cups. Here's the black wash with again pudding cup. Lots of it. Here's a paintbrush that can handle an awful lot of liquid in it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to dip. And I always start with the brown, and then I put a black, then I put a brown. It seems to work that way. It gives it more of a brownish look. If you wanted it darker, then you could go with the couple black coats. So just dip it, and lots of newspapers, or do this in a cup somewhere. So you can see I'm doing this relatively erratically and unevenly. And then I put some on the side, just very roughly. Lots of liquid, lots of uneven. The worse you are at this, the better you're going to do. And I do this for every single car. Again, this is the darker car that I had before, and you can see how that this white that I had put onto it. You see how I'm just kind of dabbing lots of liquid, and it's just being absorbed by that by that white acrylic before it. So I'll finish the rest, but the next step after I finish all of these is I would just dip into the black. You see, even though this isn't finished and it's not, you know, there's rough striations, I just start putting on some randomly, right? Just like that, and on the side, and I let it drip on the other cars as well, right? Front and back, and do this. You see, so the washes are kind of melding into one another. Because they're still very wet, and I think hopefully you can see some of that, and you can see some of the unevenness that's starting to occur. So a little bit of black on this guy, again very randomly, and off we go, you know. And so I'm going to finish the rest, and then we'll get together when they're dry, and we'll start weathering the wheel sets and the couplers. Okay, so I waited about 10-15 minutes or so. You can see the alcohol makes this stuff dry really quick, and you can already see it's very uneven, which is really great. And it's well, you know, it's kind of dryish to the touch. And this is where I put the next, the third coat of this brown wash that we talked about before, and I just go ahead and dip a lot of it into it, and just randomly just go all over this, just put it aside. Now on this table, as you can see, just being pretty random, and now I'm just doing it on the top. I'm not really doing it on the sides. The sides have had enough, and you can see how fast this goes, right? I just and I'm not I'm being very, very sloppy and leaving a lot behind, right? I want all of that stuff to just sort of coagulate on here. Okay, now I'm actually done with my washes, and I take my big bottle back and just pour it back in here, right? And I let the stuff in here just dry, and it provides this cakish stuff that actually I think provides better coloring when I pour it back in. It's got little schmutz colors in it, and it just sometimes gets stuck on top of these surfaces, which all makes it give it a lot of character. All right, now it really is about letting it dry before we start putting on, rusting up the steps and the wheel sets. All right, so I will see you guys in about an hour or two. We're going to start the aging process for the wheels and the steps and the stirrups and so on. So the first thing, I just want to recommend having one of these magnifying glasses. They really help me with my eyesight, especially in the more detailed kinds of things. It just helps me to get the ink in the right place. The second thing is to get one of these Testors pens that has rust in it. It came in a set of 3, but and some of it is greenish, and I actually use these for rusting out my rails as well, for the tracks that I use. But effectively, you know, you pop the cap off, and then you just shake the heck out of it, and then you just the more you dab it going back and forth, the tip goes back and forth, and ink starts coming out, and it goes into this this pad, right? And as the ink goes away, you just do that more and more, and it comes out. Okay, so the way it goes is you start off with a car that's like this, and then I start putting ink onto the pad, and you can see how much it flowed. And it's okay that it flowed way too much, because by the time you finish doing all of the aging and putting stuff on it, it will, the fact that there was too much that came out here is going to be just fine, right? And then you start doing the ink well like this, and you just keep on going, and you put some in here. I'll actually do the coupler as well, and as well as this Katie, and doing it that way. Okay, here's one that's sort of finished, where you can see that I got the steps. I got the wheels, the coupler, I mean the trucks, and then I also put some inside of the wheel well so that I don't have anything shiny, right? And then on the very front of these, I also put a little dab right on the metal parts that you would see in each one of these. And then lastly, I also put it onto these the trusses here to tighten up the truck, as well as the things that will be holding it up. And the very last sort of touch that I put on here is right on the metal strips, and I just put a little dab, and if it dabs more and it bleeds, it's okay. It'll just make it look like sort of the messy part that rust is. Now the last couple of things that I will do is I put some right on where the brake wheel is going to go. It's got this little detail of gears, and then I'll put the post in and the gear, the brake wheel itself, and I'll rust them up all with this single pen. It's really awesome. This is such a useful coloring tool. And sometimes it's too much, right? So like here, you can see that it was too much that came out, right? But that's okay. It really will be. By the time I put the coupler and rust up the coupler and everything else in here, it will look just fine. Here's an example of another one where I did it. You know, I put it on these strips and so on, and then it bled too much right here when I put it on. It's okay. When I put something on top of this, it will look great. And you can see how nice that aging really has occurred. All right, so I'll keep working on these. I'll finish all these. These take about 5 to 10 minutes per, because there's a lot of little details and so on. It's not my favorite part of the process, but it ends up looking pretty darn nice. All right, let me finish this up, and then we'll go to the brake wheels, and then we'll be done with this project. Okay, we're getting there. So the last step in all of this weathering, as we were talking about, it's all been weathered. I like a lot of rust, so I really do put a lot of rust on the trucks, on the wheels, on the steps. I even put little dabs here and there. The very last step was adding the brake wheel, and I rusted it up. Right, and I just use again that same pen that I've shown you. You know, I just shake it up and you know, press a couple times on the tip, and ink will flow into that little pad. And then this you have to do very, very gently, where you're just caressing these around the edges and up and down the shaft. Now, once you're done with this, I now have 5 cars. If you remember, there was that one that had been weathered, that was very, very dark. It looks okay, right? It's not this uniform color. It's got some grays and whites and all this other crackly color to it, which is, at least for me, really a lot of fun. And then here is that 18-foot car that was very, very uniform in its deck color, right? And it's got a lot of rich depth and layers to it, including the rusted wheel. Okay, the same technique completely applies to gondolas, right? How do you weather the edges of a gondola? So this is an example of a low-side gondola. And I just did the same whitewash along here and just let it dry, sitting like this on newspaper. And then I put in the various washes of stains of that isopropyl mixture with the shoe polish. So and then, you know, just making sure that I rust up the little steps here. These slight different shades of colors really look nice, and maybe you can see this again. It's not perfect, and you don't want it to be perfect, right? it just it's going to slow you down like crazy, and the world isn't perfect this way anyway. And then in here I had lots of barrels, and I just made a load with a dog and a people and other things, kerosene things. Now, to show you what you can do, and in other videos I'll do this as well. Here's an example of a load. This is a yesteryear fire truck, and I can put it on here on that car, and you know it looks pretty nice. And then of course what I would do with this is put chains around it and blocks, balsa blocks around it, and I'll show in another video how to do this. And I could put a tarp on top of this as well. It looks quite nice. It's a very nice load, as if it was being transported someplace. Quite a lot of fun. Another one that looks kind of cool for these shorter 18-footers is a square tank that I got from Rusty Rail, and just painted it up. It's easy to paint. Again, be bad at it, and then just put it on the deck like this, and it's just a lot of fun. You can put kerosene tanks and lots of other things on here to really make it all look really nice. All right, that takes us all the way to the end. Just have a lot of fun and experiment with what you do. There are no mistakes, or any mistake should be considered a happy mistake. Enjoy.